It was a cold and blustery evening in New York City. The streets of Manhattan, typically alive with the hustle and bustle of city life, seemed quieter under the weight of an impending winter storm. Streetlights cast a soft glow over the sidewalks as people hurried past, their heads tucked against the biting wind. Among them was Barron Trump, who had just finished attending a private meeting with a group of young entrepreneurs. Dressed in a tailored coat and scarf, the 18-year-old walked briskly, preferring the crisp air to the confines of a car. Despite his tall frame and recognizable features, Barron had mastered the art of blending into the crowd. He valued these rare moments of anonymity, away from the flashing cameras and constant scrutiny. Tonight, he chose to walk instead of being chauffeured, eager for a moment of quiet reflection. His mind wandered as he thought about the meeting he had just attended, where ambitious young people had shared their innovative ideas to address global issues. Their passion had inspired him, but it also left him questioning what more he could do with his own platform. As he approached the corner of Fifth Avenue and 34th Street, the familiar outline of the Empire State Building loomed above him. It was here, in the shadow of one of the world's most iconic landmarks, that Barron's life was about to intersect with someone else's in a way he couldn't have imagined. He noticed a man first by the faint tune of a harmonica. The melody was simple but haunting, cutting through the cold night like a thread of warmth. Sitting on the edge of the sidewalk was a man in his late 60s, his face weathered and his eyes tired but kind. His coat was tattered, and beside him was a cardboard sign that read, "Veteran. Hungry. Anything helps. God bless." Barron stopped in his tracks, drawn by the man's presence. He stood a few feet away, watching as pedestrians hurried past, their eyes averted. Some tossed coins into the small tin can by the man's feet, but most ignored him entirely. The man continued to play his harmonica, seemingly lost in his music, as if it were the only solace he had in a world that had forgotten him. Barron felt a pang of guilt. Growing up in privilege, he had never experienced the kind of hardship this man had clearly endured. But his mother, Melania, had always instilled in him the importance of empathy and compassion. "Your actions define who you are," she would often tell him. And in this moment, Barron knew he couldn't just walk away. He approached the man slowly, careful not to startle him. The harmonica music faltered as the man looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly as he took in the young man standing before him. "Evening, sir," Barron said gently, his breath visible in the cold air. "That's a beautiful tune you're playing." The man gave a small, tired smile. "Thank you," he replied, his voice rough but kind. Not many people stopped to listen. Barron knelt slightly to meet the man at eye level. "What's your name?" he asked. "Jack," the man replied. "Jack Peterson. Used to serve in the Marines a long time ago." "It's an honor to meet you, Jack," Barron said sincerely. "Thank you for your service." Jack shrugged, his gaze dropping to the ground. "Didn't count for much in the end," he muttered. "Lost my job, my home, but I guess it's just the way it goes." Barron felt a lump form in his throat. He glanced down at the small tin can, where only a few coins rattled against the metal. It wasn't much, certainly not enough to help Jack through the night. Without thinking, Barron reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He withdrew a crisp $100 bill and placed it gently into the can. Jack's eyes widened in disbelief. "You don't have to do that," he said quickly, shaking his head. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity," Barron replied. "It's a thank you for everything you've done." Jack stared at the bill, his hands trembling slightly. "You don't even know me," he said softly. Barron smiled. "I know enough. You've been through things most of us can't imagine. The least I can do is help, even in a small way." Jack looked up at him, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. For a moment, the two were silent, the noise of the city fading into the background. It was a simple moment, but one that carried a profound weight. "Thank you," Jack finally said, his voice cracking. "You have no idea what this means." Barron stood up, adjusting his scarf against the cold. "Take care of yourself, Jack. he said warmly. "And keep playing that harmonica. The world could use more music." As Barron turned to leave, Jack called out to him. "Wait," he said. "Who are you?" Barron hesitated for a moment before turning back, his smile modest. "Just someone who wants to make a difference," he said simply. With that, he walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Jack watched him go, the harmonica resting in his lap, and for the first time in years, he felt something he thought he had lost: hope. The night might have ended there, but fate had other plans. Unbeknownst to Barron, a bystander had witnessed the entire exchange and captured it on their phone. They uploaded the video to social media with the caption, "This young man just restored my faith in humanity." Within hours, the video had gone viral, with millions of people sharing it across platforms. Comments flooded in, praising the unknown young man for his kindness and humility. Some recognized Barron Trump and were astonished by his quiet generosity. The video sparked a wave of discussions about the plight of homeless veterans and the importance of small acts of kindness. By the time Barron returned home that night, he was unaware of the storm he had created online. For him, it had simply been the right thing to do. But for Jack, and for millions of others who watched the video, it was a reminder that even in a world that often seemed cold and indifferent, there were still people who cared. The next morning, Barron Trump woke up to a flurry of notifications on his phone. At first, he ignored them, assuming they were just routine updates. But as the messages kept piling up, his curiosity got the better of him. Unlocking his phone, he was met with hundreds of mentions on social media. Confused, he opened one of the links, only to find a video of himself kneeling beside Jack on the sidewalk. The caption read, "This young man just reminded the world what kindness looks like." The video had already garnered millions of views, and the comment section was flooded with praise. People from all walks of life shared their reactions, from veterans expressing gratitude to ordinary citizens vowing to perform their own acts of kindness. But amidst the praise, there were also questions. Who is this young man? What's his story? It didn't take long for people to connect the dots. Soon, headlines began to surface. Barron Trump's act of kindness goes viral, a Trump making a difference in a humble way, and Barron Trump's simple gesture inspires a movement. Some articles focused on the viral moment, while others delved into the struggles faced by homeless veterans like Jack. Barron, however, wasn't interested in the attention. As he sat in his kitchen, scrolling through the flood of reactions, his mother, Melania, walked in. She noticed the concern on his face and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "What's wrong, Barron?" she asked gently. He sighed, setting his phone down. "I didn't do it for this, Mom. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. I just wanted to help him." Melania smiled softly, her eyes full of pride. "I know that, and so does he. But sometimes, when you do the right thing, the world notices. It's not about seeking recognition. It's about inspiring others to do the same." Her words resonated with Barron. He realized that while he hadn't intended for his actions to go viral, the attention could be used to shed light on a larger issue: the struggles faced by homeless veterans like Jack. Later that day, Barron decided to act. He reached out to a few trusted advisors and asked them to help locate Jack. With the power of social media, it didn't take long. A reporter had already tracked Jack down to a small shelter where he often stayed during harsh weather. When Barron learned of his location, he immediately made plans to visit. The next morning, Barron arrived at the shelter with little fanfare. He didn't bring cameras or a press entourage. It was just him and a small team. As he entered the modest building, he was struck by the stark reality of the place. The walls were bare, the air carried a faint chill, and the faces of the people inside told stories of hardship and resilience. Jack was sitting in a corner, his harmonica in hand, playing the same haunting tune that had first caught Barron's attention. When he looked up and saw Barron, his eyes widened in surprise. "You again," Jack said, a hint of a smile breaking through his weathered face. "Didn't think I'd see you after last night." Barron approached him with a warm smile. "I told you, Jack. I wanted to help, and I meant it. They sat together, talking for over an hour. Jack shared his story in more detail. How he had served in the Marines for over a decade, only to return home and struggle to reintegrate into civilian life. He had lost his job, his home, and eventually his family. Despite it all, he had never lost his love for music, which became his refuge during the darkest times. Barron listened intently, moved by Jack's resilience and humility. By the time their conversation ended, Barron had made up his mind. He wasn't just going to give Jack money or food. He was going to make sure Jack got a second chance. Working quietly behind the scenes, Barron used his resources to arrange for Jack to have a place to stay, access to counseling services, and help finding a job. He connected with veteran support organizations and ensured that Jack's basic needs would be met while he rebuilt his life. A few days later, Jack moved into a small but cozy apartment arranged by one of the organizations Barron had partnered with. It wasn't extravagant, but it was safe, warm, and gave Jack the chance to start fresh. For the first time in years, Jack slept in a bed, knowing he had a roof over his head. As word of Barron's effort spread, the story took on a life of its own. Inspired by his actions, others began stepping up to help homeless veterans in their communities. Fundraisers were organized, shelters received an influx of donations, and volunteer programs saw a surge in participation. But amidst all the noise, Barron remained grounded. When asked by a journalist why he had gone out of his way to help Jack, his answer was simple: because it was the right thing to do. We all have the power to make a difference, no matter how small. For Jack, life began to change in ways he had never imagined. With the stability of a home and the support of the veteran organizations, he found a part-time job teaching music at a local community center. His harmonica, once a symbol of his struggles, became a tool for inspiring others. Children at the center looked up to him, fascinated by his stories and his music. One evening, as Jack sat in his apartment, he turned on the television to see a segment about Barron Trump. The reporter praised Barron's humility and the way he had used his platform to shine a light on a critical issue. Jack smiled, feeling a sense of gratitude he couldn't put into words. Picking up his harmonica, he began to play a new tune, one filled with hope and a sense of renewal. A few weeks after Jack had settled into his new apartment and started working at the community center, the impact of Barron Trump's gesture continued to ripple across the nation. News outlets were still running features about the young man who had stepped out of his world of privilege to help someone in need. But for Barron, life had returned to normal, or at least as normal as it could be for someone in his position. He was sitting in his family's living room one evening, scrolling through updates about the growing initiative sparked by his actions. Charities for homeless veterans had reported record-breaking donations, and community centers across the country had launched programs to help those in need. Still, the overwhelming attention made Barron uneasy. He didn't want the story to be about him. It was about Jack, and the countless others like him who deserved a second chance. As he pondered this, his phone buzzed with a call from an unfamiliar number. After a brief hesitation, he answered. "Hello, is this Barron Trump?" A warm voice on the other end asked. "Yes, it is. Who's calling?" "This is Claire Sullivan," the voice replied. "I run the Harmony Veterans Center in Boston. I wanted to personally thank you for what you've done for Jack Peterson and for shining a light on the challenges our veterans face. Your story has inspired people to come forward and support us in ways we haven't seen before." Barron smiled, grateful for the kind words. "Thank you, Claire. But honestly, I didn't do it for recognition. Jack deserved help, and I'm glad I could do something for him." "Well," Claire continued, "I think you've done much more than you realize. Would you consider coming to our center to meet some of the veterans here? They've been following Jack's story, and it's given them a lot of hope. Your presence would mean the world to them." Barron hesitated. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight, especially not for something like this. But the sincerity in Claire's voice convinced him. "I'd be honored," he said. The following weekend, Barron found himself on a flight to Boston, accompanied by a small team. When he arrived at the Harmony Veteran Center, he was greeted warmly by Claire and a group of volunteers. The center was a modest but welcoming space, with walls adorned with photographs of veterans and their families. A large banner hung in the main hall, reading, "Hope, Honor, Healing." As Barron toured the facility, he met veterans from all walks of life. Some were older, with decades of service behind them, while others were younger, still grappling with the transition to civilian life. They shared their stories, some heartbreaking, others inspiring, but all marked by resilience. One veteran, a man named Miguel, approached Barron with a firm handshake. "You probably don't know this," Miguel said, "but what you did for Jack gave a lot of us hope. It reminded us that people still care, that we're not invisible." Barron nodded, deeply moved. "You're not invisible," he said. "What you've done for this country matters, and it's on all of us to make sure you're treated with the respect and dignity you deserve." The visit ended with a small gathering in the center's main hall. Claire introduced Barron to the crowd, thanking him for his efforts and the inspiration he had provided. When it was his turn to speak, Barron stood in front of the group, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I'm not a politician or an activist," he began. "I'm just someone who happened to meet a man named Jack Peterson on a cold night in New York. But what I learned from Jack, and from all of you here today, is that small gestures can make a big difference. It's not about changing the world overnight. It's about doing what we can, where we are, with what we have." The room erupted in applause as Barron stepped back, humbled by the gratitude of those around him. As he prepared to leave the center, Jack's face came to his mind again. He wondered how his old friend was doing and decided to give him a call that evening. Jack answered on the second ring, his voice warm and lively. "Barron, how's it going, kid?" Jack said, "I'm good, Jack. I just visited a veterans center in Boston, and it reminded me of you." Barron replied, "How are things on your end?" Jack chuckled. "Better than I ever thought they could be. The kids at the community center love the harmonica lessons. They're learning fast, and they keep me on my toes. And the apartment? It feels like a palace compared to where I was. I owe it all to you." "You don't owe me anything," Barron said firmly. "You've done more for this country than most people ever will. I just helped you get back on your feet." As the call ended, Barron felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced before. He realized that this wasn't the end of his journey. It was just the beginning. He decided to take his efforts further, working with organizations like the Harmony Veteran Center to create programs that provided housing, mental health services, and job opportunities for homeless veterans. In the months that followed, Barron's initiative grew into a national movement. Inspired by his quiet yet powerful example, schools, businesses, and communities came together to support veterans in ways they never had before. His story became a symbol of what one small act of kindness could achieve. For Jack, life continued to improve. His harmonica lessons became so popular that the community center hosted a recital where his students performed for their families. Jack played alongside them, his music now a celebration of hope and resilience. He often told the kids about the young man who had stopped to listen to his tune on a cold winter night, reminding them that kindness could change lives. One evening, as Barron sat in his room reflecting on everything that had unfolded, he received a package in the mail. Inside was a framed photo of Jack and his harmonica students, along with a note that read, "To Barron, who reminded me that it's never too late to start again. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Jack." Barron placed a photo on his desk, feeling a surge of gratitude. He knew that the world wasn't perfect and that there were still countless people like Jack who needed help. But he also knew that change didn't require grand gestures or infinite resources. Sometimes, all it took was stopping, listening, and choosing to care. As he looked out his window at the city lights below, Barron made a promise to himself. He would continue to use his privilege to make a difference, one person at a time. Because in a world that often felt divided and disconnected, kindness was the one thing that could truly bring people together.